Hello there, I'm the Biblical Translator, and yes, most of the times, I take information from the Bible and I paraphrase it to make it easier to understand. But sometimes I come across a situation or what I feel a message that should be given out, and I decide to do that instead. This morning is one such case. I've been watching a Korean movie and it's called Couple on the Backtrack. And what's happened is the film opens in the present, 2017. Well, it's an old film, 2017, where a young couple in their 30s have a child, and they've just got caught up in the hustles and bustles of life. The husband, he's out trying to make money, and no matter what especially in Korea, you have to be very subservient to people who are above you, and he always found himself apologizing and bowing and just being more or less like a skivvy, and that was his day-to-day life in trying to make money for the family. As a result, the wife, who they just had a young baby, was left at home by herself. And what happens in the Korean culture, if your boss demands that you go to a place or do a certain thing, you have to go and do it. Otherwise, your job's on the line. And what he found himself in situations where he was called, by his boss, who was very inconsiderate, to do all these tasks so that when the wife was calling, he couldn't attend to her needs. And then also, because she couldn't get hold of him, there was a point when her mother was dying and she needed him to take her to see her mother, and he couldn't because he was at work. And their relationship broke down and they were both very unhappy, and they didn't get an opportunity to talk. They were just constantly firefighting all the time. And it was quite sad at the beginning. But what happens is, at a last resort, the two of them take off their rings simultaneously in a different place, and they throw them out of the window. And their respective windows, she's on a bus, she throws it out the bus window, and he's somewhere else and he throws it out of another window, and you just see a flash of lightning touch the two rings, and then they're transported back to 1997 when they first met. But the thing is that they're transported back to 1997 when they first met, but they still have the memory of their marriage and the child. That's the funny thing about it. So, but they've decided that they don't want to ever meet, they don't want to put themselves through that misery, so they try to avoid each other because they know what's going to happen in the future. They know that they're both going to be unhappy, so they try to avoid each other. But what happens is the love that they had when they first met was still present, even though they were arguing, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it because of the pain and the misunderstanding. The thing is that the wife didn't know that the husband had made a promise to her mother that he wouldn't make her cry. Or he'd try to make, no, not that he wouldn't make her cry, that he'd always try to make her smile. So when she was bawling her eyes out, he would come and he would try to make a joke and try to minimize it. But she felt as though he was trivializing her pain. So she took it even worse. And he hadn't explained to her, look, your mum had asked me to try and make you smile, and that is what I was doing. And it was these constant little misunderstandings that caused so much problems. And I was thinking to myself, today, there are so many misunderstandings because of lack of communication, because we don't understand each other's motivations. We're not quite sure what the other person is thinking and why another person is behaving in the way they do. And what the being thrown into 1997, what it did for them was, yes, they resisted each other at the beginning, and they walked past each other and they're like, look, I don't even want to talk to that person. I'm going to go for the love of my life, who I loved back in school. And the two of them tried to do that, to try to kindle a relationship with their first love. But the love that they had, or the love that was developed at that time, carried it all the way through to the marriage. So they were still kind of jealous if they saw them back in 1997 talking to their first love. And the long and short of this is that they ended up talking and explaining, and he was explaining what was happening. He was always apologizing. He was trying to make her smile. And when she lost her mother, he lost his mother as well, because she was so good to him. She was so close. And he'd never looked at it from that. She had never looked at it from that perspective, that maybe he was grieving. She also never realized that it wasn't that he was minimizing her pain, but he was trying to make her smile. He was trying to fulfill the promise that he'd given to her deceased mother, and it just wasn't working. And so just through communication, when they went back into 1997, it took quite a few episodes, but every day they learnt something about each other. Every day they realised that regardless of how they didn't want to, they wanted to avoid the future of being together, they kept on saying, we've got a child, what about Soju? You know, and it got to the point where at one point the dad said, look, you know, you're more important to me than even my child. I'm willing to sacrifice my child for you, for your happiness. If I can't make you happy, I prefer that you're happy with someone else. But all the mother could think about was her son, and she wanted to make this relationship work. What's interesting is that how we, in our relationship, what is really important? What is the most important thing in your relationship that would make you fight or die for it? And the long and short is, you know, when you were so much in love at some point, you have to ask yourself, when did that break down? Why did it break down? And you have to revisit it, as hard as it may be. So they revisited and revisited, and in the end they realized it was just totally misinterpretation of actions, and that when push comes to shove, they really did love each other. And what was beautiful, it was, you know, they're young actors, but such brilliant actors. I was so captivated by it. And, you know, they touch your soul because you can understand how relationships break down. So many relationships break down because people do not have the patience to try to find out what went wrong. It's almost like they prefer to give up rather than discover their mistakes, rather than face their mistakes, rather than face criticism. They prefer to lose the relationship. But keeping a relationship alive takes bravery. It takes courage, and it takes really wanting something. You can't have a relationship and be afraid. Relationships, I think people think relationships are easy. You just go into a relationship and it takes care of itself. As long as you two of you are happy and things go well, it takes care of itself. That is not what relationships are about. Relationships are about learning about yourself, learning about the other person. When you make mistakes, trying to correct those mistakes and trying to understand why, if it is a mistake, why it's happened. And explaining your side of things and being open to listen to the other person's side of things. A lot of people, we shut ourselves down because we have a perception of how things should be and how our partner is, instead of listening for the truth and listening for consistencies and listening just for credibility and sincerity. And I think that's what people have to do with relationships to do today. Have patience enough to talk things out, care enough to see things through, and be dedicated enough to make it work. I am the Biblical Translator. I hope this made some sense. I know it's a bit off the wall, but I felt as though I needed to speak to somebody about this today. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.